Hey everyone, this is Daniel. Last week I made a video where I reviewed this game called Nocturne, which is a beta rhythm game, and I experienced kind of a bug or issue which I thought was actually really interesting to talk about. And so the issue is that there's two different tracks in the game, of the rhythm game, and one of them was just a lot quieter than the other one, which I think brings up a lot of interesting issues, and I want to explain it's really not just a volume problem, but just to demonstrate what was going on, I recorded the audio from the games, and so this was the first track, and you can even see like that is so much louder, even just the waveform, than this other track, which when I played the game I couldn't even hear this because I had my volume set to listen to this one. And so if you didn't really know any better, you might just think, oh, I just need to pump up the volume of the other track. Or maybe you would even go into an editor like this and try to increase the volume of the quiet thing. But really, it's a lot more complicated than that. It's not really volume. We're dealing with dynamic range, really. And what dynamic range is the amount of difference between the loudest sounds and the softest sounds. So if we look at this sample as a whole, this is very quiet, where if we go over here to where this attack sound is, that's really loud in comparison. So this has a lot of dynamic range in it, this sample. Now, it's not a bad thing or a good thing, it's just, it depends on what you're using the audio for. Obviously in a rhythm game you want the player to be able to understand all of the audio or hear everything clearly, not just the music but the sound effects, just everything needs to be mixed well so that, you know, it's a nice presentation to the player. And I just want to say, I'm not picking on Nocturne, it's just it was a really good example of an issue to kind of dive into. I know it's a work in progress, so this could be issues that they already understand and know how to fix. So I'm not saying like, here's how you fix your game. That's not what I'm trying to do. So how do we fix the issue of having this too much dynamic range, too much quiet mixed with the too much loud? So there's a tool called a limiter, and a limiter basically just, well, it chops off the loudest sounds, basically. There's a lot more to it just to make it, you know, there's a bit more finesse, but that's basically what it does. And so a limiter actually makes everything quieter, but when you use a limiter, it allows you to bring the volume levels of quiet things up, and without the loudest sounds getting even louder. And just to show you an example of a limiter, this is FL Studio, and here's a track. This is a little tool called Maximus, which I pass all it's just used in mixing. And this has the preamp volume that I can turn up, and in this whole range of volumes, it doesn't really get louder. And what all this purple stuff is data that's getting cut out and lost, which is could be bad or good depending on what you're doing. Obviously, when you turn this all the way up, you're really losing a lot of data. It sounds pretty bad, so you don't want to do that. So the limiter actually allows us to remove or reduce the amount of dynamic range, basically bringing everything up to the same volume. Now for music, this is actually what you call a tri-band limiter, where it cuts all the audio into 3 different pieces, low, medium, and high, and limits each piece separately. And when you do that, it brings all the lows, mediums, and highs up to kind of the same level, so it sounds nice. And that is what I'm doing in the game, actually. I actually brought these tracks into my game just so I can show you what my limiter kind of does to them. This was the louder one, And I want to just listen to how the overall loudness, but also I talk about these meters in these red and white meters. I don't know how, I'm pretty sure you can hear me over that. The first one is a master limiter, and then the next three are the low, medium, and high limiters. The red bar means that the limiter is kicking in, so I'm actually kind of squashing this quite a bit. I didn't change the volume of the sample, but I'm bringing everything down to like the same level that everything else in my game is at. So if we go to the quiet one, oh dear. Let's go over to that quiet track. So for this one, I brought it in. It's still being limited, but what I did was I increased the volume to about double what it was. And if you just pay attention to the basic volume level, it's actually being limited quite a lot. It's being squashed. But you can tell the effect is that it sounds the same as the other track. But I think what's more interesting is that if you listen to those attack sounds that got recorded with it, right there, that attack sound, if we listen to the original sample recording, that attack sound effect is so loud, but coming through the game and being limited like this, it brings that attack sound, where is it? Yeah, that sound, it's now brought down in line with everything else. So what this really does is just makes these two tracks, which I'm guessing they're probably sourced from different places. The reason why I have to do this in the game is because I mix a lot of different audio pieces together. Most of the tracks are just many different audio tracks or stems that I mix together. And whenever you're just mixing audio together and adding sound effects and stuff, you want to control the mix. Otherwise, if you just mix them together, you'll probably wind up with some kind of, you get strange peaks and weird things happen. So you have to like control the mix, and this is how I'm doing it. So in my game, I programmed this tri-band limiter, which is a lot like, not nearly as good because I wrote it myself, but it was a lot like this one that is used in mixing and mastering music. I kind of want to look at the code for that just a little bit. This is just this is the audio renderer function in my game. This is it's a big fat function. It mixes together all the samples from all the different tracks, and then I have these three limiters. I just take the audio and I run it through the low, medium, and high filters to split up the audio, and then individually on those three pieces I filter each one, and then I add it back together right here. That's actually a bug, but never mind. And then I actually add the sound effects in after I mix together the music, and then I apply the master limiter on top, and that kind of allows me to, it kind of lets the sound effects sit on top of the music a little bit. If there's a loud sound effect, it's gonna like squash the music, it'd be more noticeable. Another thing that the limiter does, it doesn't just cut everything off at the head. The limiter in my game, it has a thing called an attack, where if there's like a loud sound suddenly, it lets a tiny bit of the first part of the sound through, and like what that does is it adds in a little bit more of the dynamic range, letting things like kind of punch through, just so they have a little bit more impact. So in summary, there's really three main reasons for using a limiter instead of just thinking in terms of volumes. Number one, it does bring everything up to the same volume. Number two, because it's a tri-band limiter, it lets the lows, the mediums, and the highs all be brought up to the same level together, so it creates like a nice even soundstage. But the last reason is because if you have all these different audio sources, like you often do in a rhythm game because there's so many different artists and stuff, it kind of putting all that music through the same process, gets it all sounding like it's coming from the same place, and it's all like exists in the same universe. So while I have all this code doing this myself, this Nocturne, this was made in Unity, I think, and probably Unity already has like all this mixing and stuff included. I really don't know, and so I wouldn't suggest, you know, doing what I did, was kind of programming all this from scratch. But really, I wouldn't know about any of this if I didn't do this way, because this is kind of how I learn about stuff. I didn't know anything about audio when I started doing this, or, you know, limiters, mixing. So the only reason I know anything about this is because I, you know, in creating Sequence Storm, I kind of had to learn, you know, how to do this. So that's all been really useful, and I still don't know everything there is to know about audio. I'm still learning. I'm still even getting better at like listening to stuff. But I think that's it. I don't think there's much more to cover. So if that was interesting to you, check out Sequence Storm, because it's the only reason I know any of this stuff. And I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.